President Donald Trump has taken to Twitter no fewer than a dozen times to call for an end to the Senate filibuster, deriding it as outdated and ridiculous. So what's he talking about? It may be one of the most important words in the congressional dictionary, but its different meanings and application in the daily workings at the Capitol can be a bit confusing. It may help to know that the word filibuster comes from Spanish and Dutch words for pirate, and since Civil War times, it's been used in Congress to describe efforts by obstructionist legislators to pirate a debate and overthrow the Senate's usual command structure. The way they try to do that is by taking the Senate hostage, in a sense, refusing to end debate on a bill or a nominee they don't like. Today, mounting a filibuster can take two very different forms. You could call one of them the talking filibuster. It's the one that gets lots of publicity but rarely the desired result. And the other one, the unspoken filibuster, which is the almost routine business of the Senate that's gotten under the president's skin. The more dramatic kind is when a senator stands in the well and makes a single speech lasting many hours on end, either trying to talk a bill to death or to breathe some life back into a proposal. This sort of performance politics entered the popular culture with Jimmy Stewart, aka the earnest and exhausted Senator Jefferson Smith, holding forth in the 1939 Frank Capra classic, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
And as a matter of fact, I'm not going to leave this body until I do get them set.
President, will the Senator yield? The Senator yield?
No, sir, I'm afraid not.
Such cinematic triumphs rarely happen in real life, though, where feats of rhetorical endurance succeed much more often at enhancing a reputation than changing a law. Strom Thurmond's stature as a states' rights champion got a boost with the longest speech in Senate history, 24 hours and 18 minutes back in 1957. But his rhetoric couldn't stop enactment of the first civil rights law since Reconstruction. Republican Al D'Amato won re-election in Democratic New York in 1986 thanks to the second longest speech, an often comic stem-winder that lasted 23 and a half hours. But the Long Island business he was defending still lost its lucrative Air Force contract. Two more recent entrants in the 10 longest Senate speeches list gave shots of adrenaline to the 2016 GOP presidential candidacies of both Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. But neither got what they pleaded for.
I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them. Sam, I am.
The loner, in other words, is not nearly as powerful a Senate force as U.S. civics mythology would suggest. What works is when a sizable majority, which in today's Senate usually means almost every member of the party out of power, bands together against legislation. Instead of actually launching into a speech-making spectacle, they simply serve notice of their intent to filibuster as a way of acting on their objections. To overcome this, the majority has to execute a cumbersome procedure that's called cloture. 16 senators who want the bill to advance have to sign on to a petition. Then, an intervening day has to pass before any vote can be taken. And then the legislation moves to the next step only if 3/5 of the entire Senate, which is usually 60 members, votes to invoke cloture. Oftentimes, the minority makes the majority get over this hurdle more than once, the first time on whether to even begin debate on legislation. And even after 60 senators vote to close off debate on the bill itself, the rules still permit another 30 hours of deliberation, although only amendments that are germane to the topic at hand can be considered after that point. The rules as they exist today are not nearly as protective of the political minority's rights as they used to be. There wasn't even any system for cloture or closing off debate until 100 years ago. For the next 6 decades, it took a 2/3 vote, ultimately 67 senators, to break a filibuster, but that hurdle was lowered to make it a bit easier to 60 back in 1975. At about the same time, the filibuster was eliminated as a tool for stopping bills designed to lower the deficit, tax overhauls, spending cut packages, and, most recently, the GOP plan for replacing Obamacare. And then in this decade, the Democrats carried out what got dubbed the nuclear option, so that nominees for executive branch jobs and the lower federal courts could all get confirmed by simple majorities. And then this year, the GOP took away the final filibuster on a nominee, which was for a Supreme Court justice. President Trump says that's still not enough, and that 51 votes should be the finish line for making anything happen in the Senate. Mitch McConnell says a flat no to doing that. One of the many reasons the president has sounded so ticked off at the majority leader lately. But the filibuster is at the heart of what makes the Senate the Senate. If it totally goes away, there'll be no point in keeping alive the legend of how Washington and Jefferson came up with the idea of a tea set as the metaphor for Congress. The House, the cup brimming with popular sentiment, and the Senate, the saucer where legislative passions get poured so they would cool down.